Good evening. I'm going to continue reading The Speckled People by Hugo Hamilton, in one of the finest memoirs to have emerged from Ireland in many years. The acclaimed novelist Hugo Hamilton brings alive his German-Irish childhood in 1950s Dublin, between his father's Irish strict nationalism and his softly spoken stories of his mother's German past. This little boy tells the tale of a whole family's homesickness for a country and a language they can call their own. So we're now going to continue with chapter 4. On the front door of our house there is a number 2. I know how to say this number in German. Zwei is way. My mother teaches us how to count up the stairs. 1, 2, 3. And when you get to 10, you can start again. So many steps all the way up that you can call them any number you like. And when we're in our pyjamas, we say, "Good night, birds. Good night, trees," until my mother counts again very quickly, and we jump into bed as fast as possible. 1, 2, 3. There are workers in the house, and they know how to smoke. They made a mountain in the back garden and sit on it, drinking tea and eating sandwiches. They smoke cigarettes and mix sand and cement with a shovel. They whistle and make a hole in the middle where they pour in the water to make a lake. And sometimes the water spills from over the side before the shovel can catch it. We do the same with spoons. The workers have different words, not the same as my mother, and they teach us how to count in English. 1, 2, 3. But my father says, "That's not allowed." He says he'll speak to them later. One day there was a fox in the kitchen, just like the fox in the storybook. The workers were gone, so my mother closed the door and called the police. Then a gardener came to our house and went into the kitchen on his own and started banging. There was a smell of smoke, and we waited on the stairs for a long time until the gardener came out again with the fox lying dead on the shovel with his tail hanging down and blood around his mouth and nose. "You'll have no more strangers in your house, please God," he said. The gardener showed his teeth to my mother and called her Madam. The workers called her Mom. We called her Mutty or Mama, and my father is called Vatty, even though he's from Cork. The gardener had a moustache and said it was no fox we had in the kitchen, but a rat the size of a fox. Ooh. And the rat was very click, he said, because he hid behind the boiler and would not come out until he was chased out with fire and smoke. There were other people living at the top of our house, all the way upstairs, further than you can count. They're called the O'Neills, and they never take their hats off because they think the hallway's like the street. My mother says they're very noisy and my father makes a face. He goes up to speak to them, and when he comes down again, he says, he wants the O'Neills out of the house. There'll be no more chopping wood under this roof. Anne came to look after us when my mother had to go away to the hospital. She's from Connemara and has different words, not the same as the workers or the O'Neills or the Garda or my mother. She teaches us to count the stairs again in Irish. A hay on a doo, a tree. She doesn't lay out the clothes at night or tell stories. She doesn't call me Hanny or Joanne's. She calls me Sean instead. Sometimes Jack. But my father says that is wrong. I should never let anyone call me Jack or John, because that's not who I am. My father changed his name to Irish, so when I grow up, I'll change my name too. Anne can't speak my mother's words, but she can speak the words of the Garda. She brings us for a walk along the seafront and shows us the crabs running sideways and the dog barking for nothing all day. She says she wants to go to London, but it's very far away. And Connemara is far away too. I said London was far away one, and Connemara was far away too, and she said yes. She sits for a long time looking out across the sea to London. Then she takes us up to the shops to buy sweets, and I get more than France because I'm very thick. She teaches us how to walk on the wall all the way back along the seafront, and France makes up a song about it. Walk on the wall, walk on the wall. My mother came back with a baby called Maria. So that's France, Joanne's and Maria. Eins, zwei, drei. We speak German again. And my mother shows us how to feed the baby with her breast. Maria opens her mouth and shakes her head, and then my mother has to change her nappy because the baby did AA. After that, my mother puts Maria out in the garden with a net across the pram to stop the birds from stealing her dreams. Anne took us down to the sea again because Franz had a fishing net and he was going to catch one of the crabs. They were too fast. I said they were all too fast and 3 fast. And Anne said yes. She took out a box with a small mirror and put lipstick on her lips. She took off her shoes to put her feet into one of the pools with the crabs. I started throwing stones into the pools. Franz got all wet, and Anne said, "Ay, ay," in Irish. Then I threw a stone in Anne's pool. She chased after me, and on the way home she would not let me walk on the wall. So I tried to walk sideways like the crabs. My mother knows everything. She knows that I was throwing stones. Anne said it wasn't half as bad as that, which is the same as what my mother says, only in different words. How so schlimm? My mother wagged her finger and said, John, which is the same as what Anne says in English, boy, oh boy, and an Irish, Amma Hayako. That evening my mother brought us up to the station to collect my father from the train. She picked us up to look over the wall at the tracks. We waved and shouted at the train rushing through under the bridge. And then we started rushing through under the bridge, and then we started running towards my father coming out of the station. My father is different to other men. He has no moustache, but he has glasses, and he has a limp too. He swings his briefcase and his leg goes down on the one side as if the ground is soft under one foot. It's the same as when you walk with one foot on and one foot off the pavement. My mother kisses him and puts her arm around him. He looks into the pram at Maria to see if she has her eyes open. Vance tries to carry the briefcase, and I try to walk like my father, but that's not allowed. He hits me on the back of my head, and my mother kneels down to say, it's not right to imitate people. You always have to walk like yourself, not like your father or the crabs, just like yourself. At home my father was still angry. He wanted to know why I was throwing stones at the pools. So I told him that Ain said AA in Irish. I mixed up the words like sand and cement and water. I used Ain's words and told my father that she said AA, what the baby did in my mother's words. What did you throw? My father asked. Stones. I saw myself twice in his glasses, and he made a face, just like when the O'Neills were chopping wood upstairs. Stones, he said again, in a very loud voice. Then he stood up. My mother was laughing and laughing until the tears came into her eyes. She said it was so funny to hear so many words and so many countries being mixed up. Stones? My father said again. I won't have this. It's not half as bad as that, my mother said, still wiping her eyes. She's here to speak Irish to them, my father shouted, and then my mother tried to stop him going up to speak to Ain. She was holding on to his arm and said, leave it till morning, let me talk to her. My father says, there'll be no more chopping wood and no more speaking English under his roof. I stay awake and look at the light under the door. At night, I hear my mother and father talking for a long time. I hear the O'Neills coming up the stairs, and I hear my father coming out on the landing to see if they will start chopping wood. Then the light goes out. I hear water whispering. I hear a fox laughing. I hear stones dropping into pools, and I hear sand and cement being mixed with a shovel. Then it's silent, and nobody is listening, only me. My mother spoke to Ain the next day. She's not able to speak Ain's words. So in the words of the Garda and the workers, my mother tells her never to speak the words of the Garda and the workers to us again. You must try to speak to them in Irish, my mother said. What good is that to them? Ain said. Please, it's my husband's wish. So we have to be careful in our house and think before we speak. We can't speak the words of the Garda or the workers. That is English. We speak Ain's words from Connemara. That's Irish. Or my mother's words. That's German. I can't talk to Ain in German, and I can't talk to my mother in Irish, because she'll only laugh and tickle me. I can talk to my father in German or Irish, and he can speak to the Garda and the workers for us. Outside, you have to be careful too, because you can't buy an ice pot in German or in Irish, and lots of people only know the words of the Garda and the workers. My father says they better hurry up and learn Irish fast, because we won't buy anything more in English. Sometimes Anne speaks to herself in the mirror, because we won't buy anything more in English. Sometimes when the O'Neills go through the hall on their way out the front door, my mother says good morning to them, but they say nothing at all and just walk out, as if they don't understand their own language. Sometimes the man in the fish shop says Guten Morgen, as if he's forgotten his own language. Sometimes people whisper. Sometimes they spell out the letters of a word. And sometimes people try to forget their own language altogether. And Anne continues to say stones, as if there is no word in her own language for it. Stone more and stone big, she says. Big stone and little stone. On Saturday, Anne goes into the city on the bus to speak English. The O'Neills were gone away too, and my father was in the garden digging. He said he was going to get rid of the mountain the workers left behind and grow flowers and radishes. So I watched him as he jabbed the spade into the soil and then pushed it down with his foot. The worms living in the mountain had to go away in the wheelbarrow. My father emptied it and spread out the soil in another part of the garden. Then he let me hold the wheelbarrow while it was filling up again. Franz made a wall with a line of bricks, and he was walking on it singing, "Walk on the wall, walk on the wall." My father stopped digging and told him to stop. He made the kneel face again, but Franz kept on saying, "Walk on the wall," because that was his song and he couldn't forget it. Then my father jabbed the spade into the mountain, and it stayed there, standing up on its own, while he went over to Franz and hit him. He hit him on the back of the head, so that Franz fell off the wall and his face went down in the bricks. When he got up, there was blood all around his nose and mouth like the fox. He opened his mouth and said nothing for a long time, as if he had forgotten how to use his voice, and I thought he was going to be dead. And he started crying at last, and my father took him by the hand and very quickly brought him inside. "Mein armer Schatz," my mother kept saying, as she sat him up beside the sink and started cleaning the blood away from his face. Franz kept crying and trying to say something, but he didn't know what words to use. And my mother turned to my father and looked at him as if she could not believe her eyes. "His nose is broken," she said. There were drops of blood on the kitchen floor. They made a trail all the way down into the garden. My father said he was very sorry, but the rules had to be obeyed. He said Franz was speaking English again, and that had to stop. And my mother and father had no language at all. My father went outside again, and my mother brought Franz upstairs. Even when the blood stopped, he was still crying for a long time, and my mother was afraid that he would never start talking again. She sat down on the bed and put her arm around the two of us and told us what happened when she was in Germany in a very bad film. She held us both very hard, and I thought my bones would crack. She was crying, and her shoulders were shaking. She said she was going back to Germany. She would take us with her. She started packing her suitcase. wondering what she should bring and what she should leave behind in Ireland. I looked out of the window and watched my father fill the wheelbarrow and bring it to another part of the garden, empty it and bring it back again. I watched him digging and digging until the mountain was gone. I wanted to go down and tell him that my mother fixed Francis' nose with a story. I wanted to tell him that I would never say, "Walk on the wall," as long as I lived. I wanted to tell him that my mother was going home and she was going to take us with her. But he never looked up and he didn't see me waving. Instead, he made a big fire in the garden and the smoke went across the walls, over the other gardens, all around the houses and out on the streets. He kept stacking on more and more weeds and leaves with a big fork, as if he wanted to send a message around the whole world with smoke. The fire crackled and whistled and it smelled like cigarettes. My father was standing with a fork in his hand. Sometimes he disappeared. Sometimes the whole house disappeared, and people must have thought we were never coming back. My mother carried Maria in one arm and the suitcase in the other. In the hallway, she put the suitcase down so that she could open the front door and escape onto the street. I knew that my father would be searching for us all over the place in the smoke. But my mother said we were not going to be trapped again. She picked up the suitcase and told us to follow her. But then I heard my father coming in from the garden. His footsteps came all the way, as if he was counting the drops of blood on the ground. He tried to run away fast, but it was too late, because he was already standing right behind us. I could smell the smoke on his clothes. He asked my mother where she was thinking of going to without any money. He said there was nothing left in Germany and she had nowhere to go home to with 3 children. He closed the front door and said she was married now. So she sat down on the suitcase and cried. "She's just a bit homesick, that's all," my father said. He smiled and said he would put on some German music. He kissed my mother's hand and carried the suitcase back up the stairs. Then the big music filled the whole house. It went into every room, all the way up the stairs. Outside, the fire kept going until it got dark, and I stood at the window of the bedroom again with my mother, saying, "Goodbye, smoke, goodbye, birds, goodbye, trees." But we didn't go anywhere. We stayed in Ireland, and my mother told us to get into bed. 1, 2, 3. We stop here, and the next time it will be chapter 5. God bless you all and good night. So we'll do another of the book another time. All right, I hope you like that as much as I did. It's a lovely story. We've got a long way to go yet.